Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Decision to Leave. This film was directed by Park Chan-wook. I am a huge Park Chan-wook fan, and I think he is one of the great directors living today. He is, of course, from South Korea, and this is his first film since The Handmaiden in 2016, and that is a film, I reviewed it this year, but I consider it to be maybe one of his crowning achievements, or among maybe the top three. If you are a fan of him, you know that he tends to create a major impact on you, and so naturally we have kind of, a certain type of expectation associated with his work, unfortunately. If you make a film like Oldboy, it's a very indelible type of film, so naturally it's very hard to get a film like that out of your mind. And when you look at a film like Decision to Leave, it's, I think, quite a different experience in the sense that it's maybe more refined. And for me, one of my complaints about him is that at times his ambition can become a little bit too overwrought, or the artistry of the films can become overwrought as a result. And when I look at this film, yes, I think overall it is maybe less sumptuous, it's less operatic, I think, due to its themes of, disconnection in the modern world. And it is palleted through the framework of a kind of more traditional film noir, very procedural type of film noir. And certainly when you watch the film, there are major influences in it. Certainly Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, and maybe elements of Billy Wilder's Double Indemnity as well. And just overall, Park Chan-wook, he has a lot of Western influence in his films. But he takes a lot of those tropes that we've seen before, and he's creating a lot of pronounced expressionism out of it. In my opinion, I think the closest he came to maybe finding like the perfect harmony between the story and the execution of it, if that makes sense, would be in The Handmaiden. And he found a way to, first of all, tell the story, which is difficult in itself with all of its very subversive tactics, how it's inverting the plot inside and out, so you kind of look at it from different points of view. But all the while, he is creating this budding momentum that really stirs the emotions in your soul, I feel like. So it's a very, very impactful type of film. But here, as I said, we are creating more subtlety in Decision to Leave. And in some ways, I think that is a great thing to see from him. But in other ways, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I admire so many different things about this film, particularly visually, the aesthetics. A lot of the performances are really amazing. Individual scenes and just moments really stuck with me. But it's just overall, when it all comes together, it just wasn't clicking into place. And for me, a lot of the problem came from the execution of it. I found myself really struggling with the way the story was presented, and maybe that is a flaw in me, absolutely. I sense the film gets richer in terms of its impact with multiple viewings of it, and that's typically how Park Chan-wook films work, at least for me. But for me, the pure essence of what the film is trying to convey and just the clarity of things just gets lost in the shuffle for me. Because I do think, even though there's a lot of intriguing ideas going on here, it felt like it was maybe a little bit too ambitious this time, a little bit too overstuffed. And ultimately, it kind of leaves me cold and a little bit scatterbrained while I'm moved in certain ways. There are other times where I feel like I'm not sure exactly what we've arrived at the conclusion. Because this is film noir, naturally the story revolves around a murder mystery, of course, and we have this young, successful detective at the center. He is our protagonist. He seems to be very confident and very well respected in his career. He seems to have, a pleasant enough marriage, but he is in charge of this new investigation that involves a man who apparently fell to his death while hiking in his favorite spot. But perhaps it was not an accident. So naturally, immediately, the detective gets in touch with the wife of the deceased man, and he's immediately taken with her because she is very alluring, and it doesn't take long before he, of course, is going to fall for her. And as you would expect from this type of story, he begins to completely disregard his morals as a detective, and it's very clear from the beginning that she has everything to do with her husband's murder. Because of the type of story that this is, there's really no sense in creating tension in the same ways you might, just because we've seen the story so many times. And so it's like we are following a very specific template, at least in the first half of the film, just like Hitchcock does in Vertigo. So it knows you're looking for suspense in maybe different areas, or you're looking for the unique things maybe kind of between the lines here. And naturally, you can tell that Park Chan-wook, the whole film just knows all these tropes very well. So therefore, it is going to punctuate all of the different moments with splashes of color. And this film has an incredibly rich color palette. I absolutely love the way the colors ignite in this film. I think it's really breathtaking, and so many of the images are breathtaking in it as well. There is a chilling type of elegance and a melancholy just kind of always running through it. Those kind of sapphire hues and the forest greens really stick out to me, and then there's like a sharp contradiction of more of the scarlet hues as well. I just love that the filmmaking filmmaking and the imagery, especially in the opening of the film. Just the feeling of it. Again, there's a lot going on here, and I'm immediately intrigued by it. I really like how it's kind of plucky and slightly humorous. But there's also, naturally a very curious tone going on, and we are introducing a lot of the early themes. We're seeing mortality, fear of mortality, especially from the detective very early on, and just there's always a looming weight of time in the film, and just a feeling of like modernity really stifling the main character, and there's always this yearning, of course, to escape your routine. One of my favorite moments is when the detective's at the top of the cliff, at the scene of the crime, and he's looking down at the victim who is dead. On the ground, and it's like the victim has all these like bugs and ants crawling all over his face and on his actual eyeballs. And the camera acts as his actual eyes, and you can see the bugs, crawling over the lens, but you can see the detective at the top of the cliff. And I think that is just a really, really fantastic image, creative. And I like that idea is going to reverberate little by little throughout the rest of the film. When the detective meets the climber's wife, the way we are introduced to her, especially visually, is quite different than what you would expect. Normally you would expect, like a close-up of her, and we get a shot of her face, but you don't here. There's a lot of indirect shots of her at first, a lot of profile shots that are filtered through some sort of like digital screen, and again, it's creating kind of disconnected eyeline shots. And when the camera cuts, it's not quite adding up, and the detective and the femme fatale are rarely kind of in the same shot in a way that is intimate. So you can always feel that throughout the movie. And again, it's very conscious, it's very much by design. I think it does to a degree create this feeling of very aching isolation, and yet there is this thrill of the potential for an intimate relationship. The way that the Mahler symphony is really swelling at times throughout the movie, our hero is, it's like he's laying down and he's looking up at the clouds, and it's like this really powerful moment. It's as if he's accepting death in this moment, and then we realize, oh no, he's just listening to his headphones, listening to music, taking a nap, like on a lunch break or something, and his alarm goes off. So it's those little moments, I think, that are really kind of reinforcing the modernity and just the routine we have in life. It creates just dissatisfaction. We're caught in a loop, and we're caught often in our own circumstances, and we're very lost in a sort of digital cocoon of phones and emails. When the detective is having sex with his wife, it's, he's clearly bored when it comes to pleasing her, and yet he's not fantasizing in a very literal way about the femme fatale here. Instead, it's like he's attracted to the violence of the shows that she watches late at night when she's home alone. So that is sort of triggering a sexuality, and yet there are also these thoughts of mortality that are weighing him down at the same time. So even though these two characters are often not even in the same room, they're often very distant from each other, and there's always all kinds of circumstances that are keeping them apart. I like that there is this very interesting energy between them. It's often in subtle ways, but they also do some visual things there where they're creating kind of these imaginative sequences where, even if they aren't in the same room with each other, we imagine that they are, or the characters are imagining that they're in the same room. I think that creates an intimacy when there isn't any, but also it reinforces the disconnect between them. And, I'm not sure exactly how I feel about the device, because I do think it is cool at times, as I said, and it creates kind of a foggy experience because there is confusion naturally there. It's like, wait, are they in the same room? Oh, no, I don't think they are. But at the same time, I do feel like it kind of works against the tension for me. But I have to say, I think one of the best things about this film is the actress who plays the femme fatale. And I think Park Chan-wook, he's amazing when it comes to finding the right actor for a role, especially a film like this, which is an incredibly complex type of thriller, and you've got all kinds of different tones here, so you need people to be able to be funny and dramatic. But our femme fatale here, I think, has the most difficult job because she, is having to compel us forward, but also repelling us at the same time. And the actress, she's just incredible. Her face, it's like, it somehow seems to be very young and impressionable, and yet it's also very jaded, old, but wise. And that's just very strange, something you don't see often, someone who looks both old and young at the same time. And, she seems like she's mature, she seems composed, but really we have no idea. And that mystery is so thick throughout it. And even at the end of the film, when, a lot is coming to light, I think more when it comes to her motivations, she's still very cold as a presence to us and the people around her. But I do have to say, when things start to materialize in the second half of the film and more is coming into focus, especially from the detective's point of view, and the romanticism is starting to shift in a very different direction, I feel as though I'm kind of getting lost in the technique of the film and a lot of the plot points. I want our femme fatale, as I said, to remain very elusive, and yet I want something more from her at the same time. She is a woman who is tainted from the very beginning, and that is, naturally, part of the archetype. But this character is born into a life, unfortunately, where it's kind of defined an aspect of her identity always. So her means of control is basically an act of desperation over the men in her life. And she clearly doesn't know a lot about what it means to be happy because she's never really had a chance to experience it. And yet she uses her control, her power, in order to find that happiness. But because of the way that she is using it, of course, she's never going to be happy. And that's what the detective represents to her, I think. I think he represents an opportunity for sure, but I also think he represents more an idea, but it's a distant idea of what could have been or what could be. What if things were different? How would our stories change? But naturally, somebody like her, born into those types of circumstances, could never work with somebody like him. Morally, those paths can never collide, and it's how it's reflected in this modern society. To me, that is the crux of everything. That should be the ache that I feel, especially in the third act, or at least that's what I'm hoping for as a viewer. The third act of the film, especially maybe the final 20 minutes of the film, is really devastating, and yet there is still a hollowness to it at the same time for me. That is, again, working against the emotion and the drama. There is something to it where the artistic flow, naturally being a little bit different, it's resistant to those natural beats. I think it kind of stifles the experience somehow. The film is muddying the waters between modern day communication or miscommunication and naturally modern views of our morals, politics between China and Korea, and of course the nature of time, as I mentioned before, and certainly voyeurism in a cinematic sense is a big thing there, and how it relates to violence. But it's just, there's a lot, and it is overwrought. I wanted to be able to give more singular focus to certain elements and allow them to grow in a certain way. And like I said, with Park Chan-wook, we are always looking for that moment, particularly halfway through the film, where he is going to use these subversive tactics in order to change the way that we look at the narrative thus far. And often I think those revelations allow for the story to become more clear, more in focus, and it serves the momentum of the film. This is an experience that worked mainly in spurts for me, as I've said. And again, it might be one of those situations where it grows with time for me, and I'll see it multiple times, I'll absorb it differently, but I've got to be honest with you guys and just tell you what my initial response was, and I was a bit dissatisfied. I found myself really amazed by certain images and certain sequences and ideas, and yet, like I said, when it's pieced together, it's not creating that beautiful mosaic in the way that I know that he can do. But that said, if you are a cinema lover, I do recommend it. First of all, because it is Park Chan-wook, but second of all, it is just it's a really interesting film. It's a very crafty thriller, and it is intriguing. And I think there are going to be all kinds of different reactions to it in terms of what it means to you. But I will just say that if you are a Park Chan-wook fan, this is not, his typical brand of movie. It's not nearly as dramatic in that same fashion. It's just a little more subtle, more reined in, and maybe you might prefer that. But that is the review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website, as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you are interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are wonderful. Guys, thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.